True Crime Declassified is not suitable for children. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome to episode 1 of True Crime Declassified, where we go behind the scenes of your favorite true crime content and creators. Today, I'm chatting to Crimes Through Time, hosted by the lovely Karen Purnell. Karen is the host of a true crime podcast that explores real crimes through time and deep dives into real figures, investigative techniques, crime scene analysis, and forensic developments. Thank you so much for joining me, Karen.
Thank you for having me.
So you are drawn to historical crimes specifically. Why is that?
I think it's because I like to see how things have changed and how dramatically different the court system used to work, investigations, how little evidence would allow people to be arrested. And obviously a lot of them are solved, so you can provide an answer. And sometimes using modern techniques, we look back with completely different eyes at some of these cases.
Yeah, it's so interesting being a modern podcaster, looking at these crimes through a modern lens. Is there one thing that stands out to you the most where you think that would never happen these days?
I think it's what you're allowed to say in court is quite shocking. And you could really vilify a victim, even if they had passed away. I did one episode, The Killer Princess, and the victim was an Egyptian prince, and yet they went into what can only be described as complete racism. Wow. But it was completely acceptable. But even researching it, I was like, oh, you just couldn't. And I wouldn't, just from that, the sensibility of society right now. You just would never talk about people like that. So I think it's the way the court system has changed about how you can present people and the evidence and how you can interpret it. It's quite shocking.
Wow, yeah, I think it's so different compared to the modern true crime podcast that I think we're also used to. And it's obviously very common in true crime to look at the criminal justice system, to look at policing through a slightly more critical lens. I imagine historical crimes, that is just taken to a whole new level.
Yes, definitely. The advent of sort of what we would call modern forensics and what they were allowed as evidence back then, and what we sort of have as the bar of what would make an actual case against somebody now, it's just miles apart.
Can you think off the top of your head the most ridiculous piece of evidence that someone's tried to bring up in court?
So this one is a long time ago. So there's the Red Barn murders, and it is in the 1700s, but he was convicted because the victim's mother-in-law had a dream that it was him.
Oh, wow. Goodness.
It may have transpired later on that perhaps she'd set him up, but yes, she was allowed to testify to her dream on the stand. So that is the most ridiculous piece of evidence I've seen. But a more modern day example would be in the Brides in the Bath court case. So Bernard Spilsbury, he was a very enigmatic sort of father of forensics as we see it now, actually brought in a bathtub with water and to demonstrate how this would have happened without people hearing them thrashing. And he literally just pulled the legs of this model and nearly killed her in front of the entire courtroom to demonstrate it was possible.
Wow.
So, yeah, it can be quite... If I wrote it in a novel, you wouldn't quite believe.
Yeah, it's so common with historical crime cases where someone comes out and says, I believe this because the victim visited me as a ghost. And you just can't believe that that sort of testimony was taken seriously at any point in history.
Yeah.
So you also offer crime-solving games with a historical twist. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, so I have always loved the idea of how the crimes are solved. That's sort of the viewpoint that even my true crime sort of content is. So the games are written with a historical backdrop. So the one I have out at the moment is in the 1920s, and I sort of talk about it as if it's like the film Titanic. So Titanic is a real event, but then you stick over a fictional story. So I pick out different sort of historical things that were true to the time, and then put on a fictional crime for people to solve.
It's so interesting, and I think not something that people will have ever come across before. How do you decide which crime cases to turn into games and which ones to leave out of the business?
Yeah, so all the crimes that are games are completely fictional. That doesn't mean that there isn't a seed of inspiration. For Beatrice, who is the poor old soul in Songbird, it was the idea that you could reinvent yourself, which was a new sort of thing in the 1920s, that women were beginning to be able to divorce. They were able to live by themselves. And it was just that idea that she would reinvent herself in London, but then unfortunately meet some characters that were from the Bright Young Things, which was an actual movement of aristocracy and famous people who would just tear up London in a raucous kind of way.
Yeah, very paint the town red.
Yes, in to the extreme. Right. And that would then lead to her demise.
Right, I see. So it's more taking influence from the crime cases and from the society at the time. I think that is such a good educational tool for people who maybe want to learn more about society in, say, the 1920s, to immerse themselves in it. It's such a really cool idea.
And it's the idea that you are taken back before there is DNA. There's no cameras, there's no nothing like that. So it is a observational, logic-driven puzzle game centered around murder.
And crime solving nowadays, I think, compared to kind of the 1920s, it's just leaps and bounds ahead. So it must be really fun for people to go back to that time period, and you can't just go and search up some CCTV, or everyone's got a mobile phone with a camera on, so everyone videos things nowadays. No, it's fantastic. And what first sparked your own interest in true crime?
So this was my mum. My mum was always a true crime and horror sort of fan. So as I got to be in my teens, it was just something that we had a shared interest in. So yeah, definitely my mum.
Brilliant. And would you know what got her into true crime?
I think it was unresolved ambition for my mum. I think she very much would have liked to go into sort of the pathology lab. She was sort of very science minded. So yeah, I think it was that living vicariously through that interest is something that she potentially would have wanted to do as a career.
I find it so interesting that it's more often than not women that are interested in true crime than men. I know for me, I love it. My mum loves it. She watches all the BBC Channel 4 documentaries. My dad doesn't want anything to do with it. My husband is like, I cannot wrap my head around why you want to sit and listen to this.
Yeah, my dad was the same.
And it's odd, I think, to try and describe it as to why we like true crime, because no matter how you try and phrase it, it always sounds a bit weird to say, oh no, I just enjoy listening to people talk about murder. That
is that juxtaposition between it being so dreadful and these people's worst moments, but then also finding entertainment in it as well. But I think it's because we see it as something that we perhaps wouldn't do. And so it's that kind of, I can't believe that they did this. And then you want to know why and sort of unpick it all.
It is very uncanny valley where these criminals look like humans and sound like humans, but they are so inhuman to us. Is there any historical crime case or even modern crime case that has really stuck with you because of that?
The one that really sort of I remember as a chat, like in my teens, was the James Bulger case, because it happened so close to where I live. Yeah, that really sort of shocked into realization, with their perpetrators being so young, that sort of, how could you do that? Yeah, but there's so many through history. I mean, Jack the Ripper, the fact that he came and went, and could he really be H.H. Holmes, the first serial killer in America, because there is some time that he was there when the killings were happening. And the level of violence that these people are capable of.
Yeah, there are definitely some cases that stick with you more than others. I know for me, that's Madeleine McCann. Being from Leicestershire, obviously that's where her and her family were from. And we drive to our family's houses and we drive past where they used to live. And I know for me, when I hear stories about Madeleine McCann, obviously she's been in the news recently again, it almost doesn't feel like true crime to me because it is so close to home. It feels too real for it to be considered true crime. And I know I struggle to listen to any sort of true crime podcasts or read any books on Madeleine McCann because it is so close to home. So I think it's interesting where we, as audiences, put that degree of separation between us and the crime case, I guess, in a bid for us to be able to enjoy it.
Yes, I think that's definitely a thing. I think you find it easier to be entertained by, if that's the right phrase, like cases from America, because you do have that distance as well as that sort of fourth wall where it's on the TV, it's not in real life. And it's strange that it's the cases that are so close to where we live that stick with us, because it sort of steps into your real life and then it becomes far more real.
I came across an interesting term. Those of you who may not know, I'm doing a PhD on the ethics of true crime. And as I was researching, I came across the term infotainment. I'll find the source and put it in the description. And I think that really encapsulates true crime, infotainment, that it is informative and it is a vehicle for presenting these very real crime cases, but it's done in a way that is entertaining and engagement. So for me, I feel uncomfortable calling true crime entertaining because I don't want to be entertained by it. I think infotainment is a much nicer term to use. It makes more sense.
Yeah, I think that's far more accurate.
And I think that really describes as well the games that you create in terms of true crime, that it is educational, it is informative, and it's in a way that is entertaining.
Yeah, I would like to think that they are immersive and that you learn about the world in which you are put in. My next one, which for the subscription box, is set in the underworld of 1930s gangs.
Wow.
So it's being able to learn about the dynamics of it and how the police dealt with that, because I try and use as much historical facts as I can when I construct the world in which these crimes exist.
And as you're researching these crimes, what do you find is the biggest difference between policing strategies, investigative strategies 100 years ago compared to today?
Regulation, definitely. Police had a lot more sort of autonomy back then in how they conducted themselves and their investigations. I think there's a lot more access to tools and technology now, but I think that there's still that innate investigator sort of gumshoe sort of quality that policemen still have all the way through, that desire to see all the way through to the end and find a result, because some of the ways that they did it are quite ingenious, working with what they had back then. And the first time we ever used fingerprints, you would think would be in like a really big case, but it wasn't. It was the theft of some billiard balls. We left a perfect print in the wet paint of the windowsill as he jumped out.
Wow.
And they were like, right, that's perfect. And that now we can use that as an example of linking you to this crime scene.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think similarly, we're seeing a bit of a fourth wave of that recently with DNA testing, and how DNA testing is bringing forward all of these cold cases that we'd written off from decades ago, and now people are being able to solve them. I think it's Our Father on Netflix, I want to say, that was looking at that. No, that's really interesting. I think it's a good lens for people to look at policing and investigating back then, which is obviously such a difficult topic and a complex topic. I think it's important for us to look at it throughout history in that way. As a female podcaster, a female within true crime, why do you think women are drawn to true crime?
Because it is so disproportionate that it is women. I think part of it is because we are most likely to be a victim of crime. There is that sense of well, if I know all about how they selected their victims, even if this is a subconscious kind of thing, maybe I can keep myself safer from this happening to me. I think we're naturally more inquisitive. So we like to know all the details, or certainly I like to know all the details of things that have happened. There's definitely something.
It's certainly a different experience compared to male audiences of true crime. I know for me, the first true crime podcast that I started to get into was Crime Junkie, which I think is quite common for people. And it was my colleagues at the time, and we'd play the episodes, then discuss them on our lunch break. And what I found was that we were relating what was happening in the podcast to experiences that we've had, even if it's just somewhat related. So I was walking through town and I noticed that someone was following me. Even if that didn't result in evidently my murder, it's still that shared experience from it. And yeah, I think you're completely right that women look at it almost as like a guide to not be killed, a guide to not be abducted.
Yeah.
These next questions may be slightly difficult to answer. How would you describe your podcast in 3 words?
Curious, historical, and infotaining.
I love that. And curious, because what are true crime podcasters if not curious? You started with the game, I assume, and then ventured into true crime podcasting. Why did you want to make that transition from the game to podcasting as well?
Podcasting and YouTube had always been sort of a ambition of mine. But I think it was more confidence. To record my voice, to be on camera, that type of thing. So I think once, and also because I care so much about it, I wanted to make sure that I did a good job of it. So yeah, that was, so it's a personal ambition, but also it does support the business as well, because then I can tell more of the stories that I find as I'm researching for the game and building the world that lives in. I can find some of the stories of people.
I think it's another dimension as well for audiences to turn to and to sort of learn about these historic crimes. But you're completely right. It's really daunting to sit down and to record a podcast, especially within true crime, where the standard for true crime podcast is incredibly high. I mean, I'm not about to go out and do, a serial-esque investigation because I have bills to pay. But I think it's really powerful to have that deep dive into these historical cases. I think it's really unique as well to not look at modern cases, which I think is what a lot of people have done. You can listen to the same facts about Jean-Benet Ramsey, which, I mean, today is possibly starting to be considered more historical. But yeah, it's such a unique approach to it.
I think also they are some of them are the untold tales of people, because these cases, and when I select a case to cover, is because it has changed something or highlighted something that was true back then and isn't now. These cases are just as valuable for learning and finding out as the modern day ones are. And obviously, you are more likely to have already had a solution.
Yeah. Definitely. Do you find that even though you're talking about cases that are potentially hundreds of years old, you still resonate with the victims?
Yeah, because the human experience is still the same, although you may be in a different time period. It is very jarring to see the way women have been portrayed in the court system through the years, and that I resonate a lot with. These women were blamed because they dare go out dancing or wanted to work after marriage, and it's just how society's attitude has changed to victims and whether you could even report crimes against yourself as a woman in different stages through time.
Yeah, definitely. It must be really infuriating, I imagine, as well for you when you see in the modern criminal justice system where women are still being treated in a similar way, maybe not to that extent, but there still is shame around women's sexuality. And if a woman, for example, was murdered in a situation where it's with a sexual partner, it must be really frustrating for you to still see it and be like, this has been going on for far too long.
Yes, it is. And that same thread of blame seems to just will not go away, even over these hundreds of years, even though they just can't blatantly say it as they would do back then. And also, as a woman, you would have to stay in the stand and take it face to face. Back then, the same threads and the same blame can still be seen in modern cases.
So we're going to do a slight U-turn, but to go all Desert Island Disc style, and if you are slightly younger listening to this and don't know what that is, it will become apparent soon. You are on a desert island and you only have 3 true crime podcasts. Now, we're assuming that your phone is fully charged. You somehow have Wi-Fi, or you have preempted being on a desert island and downloaded the podcasts beforehand. Which 3 true crime podcasts are you choosing to listen to?
So Scottish Murders, they do a fantastic job. Old Blood podcast, and I think Crime Junkie, because it's like the one I've been listening to the longest.
Oh yeah, Crime Junkie is just the OG, I think, for everyone. In my research, Serial comes up a lot, I think, because it was kind of the first big true crime podcast. But yeah, for me, Crime Junkie was the first one. Listening to the intro and being able to recount their classic "and I'm Brit" every single time. Do you find, as a listener of true crime yourself, you're yourself drawn to historic true crime podcasts, or do you also listen to the modern ones?
I'll listen to all of it, if I'm honest. Yeah. But I do like the historic ones as well, because I like to see other people's perspective on how history has changed. But yeah, I'm a big fan of YouTube. So Stephanie Harlow, Kendall Ray, all of those on there. John Lorden. I love all their sort of modern takes on things. Yeah.
So is that your favorite to go to then? Is it YouTube and podcasting where you listen and watch a lot of your true crime?
Yes, because I find that the coverage is more open and sort of fair than, say, more constructed documentaries off of the TV.
Yeah, there's definitely a massive difference. And I see a lot of TV channels, BBC, ITV, Channel 4, very much jumping on the true crime bandwagon. And a part of me wants to gatekeep it and be like, the little people are the ones who made this genre what it is. But I digress. There definitely is a very different approach when they go about true crime. It doesn't feel as natural and authentic and human. It feels very almost like robot generated.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Yeah.
So before we wrap this up, to anyone looking for a new true crime obsession, what should they expect from Crimes Through Time?
So I look at unique cases, often ones that you may not have heard of before, mainly from the UK, that have changed history, even just a little bit.
And why do you think you favour UK crimes?
Because I don't know enough about them. Because our system is so closed off, you really have to research and go through the archives to find the details of a lot of these things. So you can bring a lot of new information. Whereas from America, because their system is so open, you can look at all the files all the time. So yeah, I think it's also that thing where I feel more aligned to it because it's so close to home. I feel like I can tell their stories more because I can understand the culture a little better.
Yeah. There's definitely a gap in the true crime market for more British cases. It's so American centered. I think you're right. It's because in America, they offer the details of crime cases almost up on a silver platter, and anything you want, you can try and access. I know we had a chat a week or so ago now, and I'm writing a true crime novel as part of my PhD research, and I'd assumed that the Freedom of Information Act in the UK extended to cold cases. So I just wrote that in my novel as if that was fact. And then after our conversation, you were like, yeah, that's not true.
No, it's still considered an open case and they won't let you access it.
Oh, it's such a different approach to America, because that's what we're so used to. That's our default with true crime, is American cases where you can just access anything. Do you think our approach to it is maybe better because it is so closed off, or do you think there should be more freedom?
I think they need less, in my opinion, and we need more. I think there should be a bit more of a happy medium, because I've just covered the Baker Street robbery. This is they tunneled from one shop up into the vault and stole from the safety security boxes that were in there. No weapons, no one was hurt or anything. But you can't see the file until 2054. And that's a case that happened in 1971. And half the gang were caught. So it's a closed case. But 2054 before you can get all the details.
And you just think, why? What purpose is that? What's so special about 2054 that's the date that it's suddenly okay to find out about it?
Yeah, because, we're almost 50 years already.
Mm-hmm.
Most of these people are in their elderly years or passed on. Mm-hmm. So there's nobody to, get in more trouble, whatever's in that file. But yeah, I think we could do with being a little bit more open. And the array of documents is I think maybe because you come from where you can't get any access, it feels like every detail shared for them.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. It feels like the American justice system is slightly an open book, and I think you're right that we do need to find that happy medium where, because true crime podcasters can do so much good. It's one of the things I'm researching at the minute, how people in true crime can do good with their research and their shows and bringing light to these cases. And I think in doing so, they need to have a bit more leeway in terms of the information available. Saying that, I think too much is obviously a bad thing. And we need to remember that true crime podcasters, we're not experts, we're not investigators. Some of them obviously are, they're investigative journalists, but I'm a writer, so not at all. So before we sign off for today, I just want to thank you so much for sitting down with me. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you, to learn about your podcast and your game. It's so interesting.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, good. And before we sign off, where can people find you? What are your social media handles?
So it's Crimes Through Time everywhere. So that's crimesthroughtime.co.uk. The podcast is Crimes Through Time everywhere where you get podcasts, or on the website, and all my social media, Instagram, Facebook, is Crimes Through Time.
Consistent. I love it. You just jumped on that username, was like, this is mine. I'm keeping this across the board.
Yeah.
And I'll leave all of the links in the description as well. But for today, Karen, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.